The first thing I heard wasn't my sister's voice. It was the feedback from the microphone, that sharp, electric screech that makes everyone stop mid-sentence and turn toward the sound. We were under string lights at Vellum Ridge Estate, a private Napa Valley vineyard where the vines stretched out like dark green rows against the fading spring sky. The air smelled like jasmine and oak barrels, cool enough that guests had grabbed their shawls, warm enough that no one wanted to go inside yet. The reception was perfect. Until Fallon Price, my younger sister, my maid of honor, my lifelong shadow, stepped up to the microphone stand near the DJ booth. She was holding a champagne flute in one hand and the mic in the other, and she had that smile. The one she uses when she's already lit the match and wants to watch you notice the smoke. "I'm so sorry to interrupt," Fallon said, voice trembling just enough to sound brave. The crowd quieted. A few people clapped, thinking it was a toast. My husband, Vaughn Sutter, stood beside me near the head table, shoulders tense, jaw tight. He looked at me, then he looked at Fallon, and I knew. Before she even said it, I knew. "I didn't want to do this here," Fallon continued, eyes shining with tears that came on cue. "But I can't keep lying anymore." She paused, let the silence stretch. A woman at table 6 leaned forward. Someone's phone came up to record. Fallon took a breath and looked straight at me. "I'm pregnant," she said. Another pause, longer this time. Then she added, voice breaking, "With Vaughn's baby." The world didn't explode. It just stopped. No one gasped. No one screamed. Everyone just froze, eyes wide, mouths half open, trying to process what they'd just heard. I heard a fork hit a plate. I heard someone whisper, "Oh my God." I heard my mother, Blythe Kavanaugh, make a small, choked sound from table 3. Vaughn's face went completely blank. Not surprised, not horrified, blank. Like someone had just asked him a question in a language he didn't speak. And that's when I knew for sure. He'd slept with her. Maybe once, maybe more, but he'd done it. Fallon's eyes flicked toward me, waiting for me to scream, waiting for me to cry, waiting for me to crumble in front of 200 people while someone's cousin filmed it for TikTok. But I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stood there in my off-white silk dress with the long sleeves and the low back, hands at my sides, breathing slowly through my nose. Because here's the thing Fallon didn't know. I'd been waiting for this. Not for this exact moment. I didn't know she'd pick the reception, didn't know she'd use a microphone, but I knew she'd do something, because Fallon always does. And 3 weeks ago, I found out what. If you've ever had someone in your family wait for your biggest moment just to destroy it in front of everyone, tell me in the comments, what did you do? Did you walk away, or did you make them face it? My name is Greer Kavanaugh. I'm 32 years old. This happened at my wedding at Vellum Ridge Estate in Napa Valley on a Saturday evening in late April. And it started 3 weeks earlier when I found a voicemail on my phone that Fallon didn't mean to leave me. But before I tell you about that voicemail, you need to understand something about my sister. Fallon Price has spent her entire life making sure I never had anything she couldn't take. When we were kids, it was small. She'd borrow my clothes and return them stained. She'd tell my friends I was talking about them behind their backs. She'd cry to our parents that I was being mean to her, and Blythe would take her side every single time. When I made varsity swim team, Fallon quit her own team and told everyone I was obsessed with being better than her. When I got into Stanford, Fallon told our family I only got in because of a diversity quota. When I bought my first condo in the city with money I saved myself, Fallon posted photos of it on Instagram before I could, tagging the location and writing, "So proud of my big sis for finally catching up." finally catching up, like my life was a race she was officiating. I spent years trying to outgrow her, but you can't outgrow someone who thinks your success is theft. And now, standing under string lights with 200 people staring at me and my brand new husband looking like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole, I realized something. Fallon didn't want Vaughn. She wanted the wedding. She wanted the moment. She wanted to be the one everyone talked about. And she was willing to lie, to humiliate me, to destroy everything I'd built just to make sure I knew she could. But here's what Fallon didn't count on. I'm not the same person she used to manipulate. I turned slightly towards Shay Pembroke, my wedding planner, who stood near the DJ booth with her headset on and her face frozen in professional horror. Shay met my eyes. I gave her one small nod. Then I looked at Knox Merriman, the head of security for Vellum Ridge, a broad-shouldered man in a black suit who'd been standing near the edge of the terrace like a shadow. Knox stepped forward, just one step, hands clasped in front of him. Fallon saw him move, and her smile tightened. "Greer," she said, voice rising, "I know you're upset, but—" I raised my hand. Not dramatically, just enough to stop her. The crowd quieted. I looked at the DJ. Young guy, early 20s, hired because Shay said he knew how to read a room, and I said, clearly, into the open air, "Play it."
Fallon blinked. "Play what?" she asked, laugh light, like I just said something absurd. But her eyes weren't laughing. They were darting, toward the exits, toward our parents, toward Vaughn. Because Fallon Price is many things, but she's not stupid. She knew what "it" meant. I didn't answer her. I just waited. The DJ looked at Shay. Shay looked at me. I nodded again, and the DJ's hand hovered over his laptop. But before I explain what was about to play, you need to understand how we got here. Not just tonight, but the entire architecture of why Fallon chose this moment, this venue, this exact method of humiliation. Because this wasn't impulse. This was strategy. 3 months earlier, Vaughn proposed to me on a quiet Sunday morning in my condo overlooking the bay. No big production, no flash mob, just him, me, coffee, and a ring his grandmother had left him. I said yes because Vaughn felt like safety. He was steady, calm, controlled. He didn't yell, he didn't play games. He looked like the kind of man who'd never humiliate you at a family dinner, or forget your birthday, or cheat. And maybe that's where I made my first mistake. I confused steady with safe. The week after we got engaged, I told my family on Sunday brunch. My father, Stanton Kavanaugh, shook Vaughn's hand and said, "Welcome to the family." My mother smiled tightly and asked when we were thinking of setting a date. And Fallon hugged me, tight, long, and whispered in my ear, "I'm so happy for you." But her hands squeezed my shoulders just a little too hard, and when she pulled back, her smile didn't reach her eyes. I should have known then, but I wanted to believe that maybe, just this once, Fallon could let me have something without making it about her. I was wrong. 2 weeks after the engagement, Vaughn started acting strange, not in a big, obvious way, just off. He'd check his phone and then put it face down. He'd say he had a late meeting and come home smelling like wine. He'd kiss me on the forehead instead of the mouth. Small things, things you could explain away if you wanted to. And I wanted to. Because planning a wedding is expensive and exhausting, and I didn't have the energy to also plan for betrayal. But then, 3 weeks before the wedding, I got the voicemail. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I'd just gotten home from a final venue walkthrough with Shay at Vellum Ridge. I was exhausted. I kicked off my shoes, dropped my bag on the counter, and saw my phone light up with a voicemail notification. From Fallon. I almost didn't listen to it. Fallon and I didn't talk much outside of family events. We texted logistics, what time to show up, what to bring, whose turn it was to deal with Mom. But calls, rare. I pressed play, and the first thing I heard was Fallon's voice, but not the version she used with me. This was the version she used when she thought no one important was listening. Confident, amused, sharp. I just have to cry a little and everyone will believe me. Greer's so calm all the time. People already think she's cold. If I say I'm pregnant with Vaughn's baby, she'll either freak out and look crazy, or she'll stay quiet and look guilty. I froze. My hand tightened around the phone. Fallon kept talking. "It's not even about Vaughn," she said, laughing softly. "I mean, yeah, he's hot, but I don't want him. I just need her to know she's not untouchable." A pause. Then a second voice, a woman's voice, older, careful. My mother. "Fallon," Blythe said quietly, "this is too much. What if she has proof you're lying?" "Mom," Fallon snapped, "I'm not stupid. I'll bring a fake ultrasound. Nobody reads those things. They just see a blob and panic. And Vaughn already agreed to say it happened once, so it'll feel real." My stomach dropped. Vaughn already agreed. I sat down on the couch because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. The voicemail kept going. Fallon's voice softened, calculated. "And after," she said, calculated, "when Greer melts down and the wedding falls apart, I'll be the one everyone feels sorry for. She'll look like the villain, and maybe then people will stop acting like she's so perfect." The line went quiet for a second. Then Fallon added almost to herself, "She doesn't deserve him anyway." The voicemail ended. I sat there in the dark, staring at my phone, replaying it twice to make sure I hadn't misheard. I hadn't. My sister was planning to fake a pregnancy, claim it was Vaughn's, and destroy my wedding in front of everyone I knew. And my mother knew about it, and Vaughn had agreed to go along with it. For the first time in my life, I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I didn't scream. I just sat there and thought, okay, if this is how you want to play it, then let's play. Because here's what Fallon didn't understand about me. I don't break in public. I plan. And over the next 3 weeks, while Fallon thought I was obliviously picking out napkin colors and seating charts, I was building something else. A trap.
The morning after I heard that voicemail, I woke up at 5:30 a.m. and made a list. Not a revenge list, a survival list. Because if Fallon was going to blow up my wedding in front of 200 people, I needed to make sure I controlled what happened after the explosion. First, I called my lawyer. Her name is Arden Quill, and she's the kind of attorney who doesn't ask questions like, "Are you sure?" or "Is this really necessary?" She asks questions like, "What do you need protected?" and "How fast?" I met her at her downtown office that same morning. I need to know what happens to me legally if my wedding becomes a public disaster, I said. Arden leaned back in her chair and studied me for a long moment. "Define disaster," she said. "My sister is planning to announce at my reception that she's pregnant with my fiancé's baby," I said. "It's not true, but she has a fake ultrasound, and my fiancé agreed to go along with it." Arden didn't blink. She just picked up her pen. "Does your fiancé's family have money?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Is there a prenup?" "Yes." "Does it have a morality clause?" I paused. "I don't know," I admitted. Arden made a note. "Then we need to pull it and read it word for word," she said, "because if there's language about conduct unbecoming or public defamation, your sister's stunt could trigger clauses that either protect you or destroy you, depending on how it's written." She was right. The prenup had been drafted by Vaughn's mother's attorney, a sharp, cold woman named Marlo Sutter, who treated contracts like battle plans. I hadn't read it carefully. I'd trusted Vaughn when he said it was standard. That was my second mistake. Arden pulled the document that afternoon, and what she found made my stomach turn. There was a clause, buried in Section 7. It said that if the marriage was terminated within 12 months due to instability, public misconduct or reputational damage attributed to the bride, certain financial protections would be voided. In other words, if I looked crazy, I lost everything. But if Vaughn looked guilty, the power shifted. So if your sister makes this accusation and you react emotionally, Arden said slowly, you play into their hands. But if you stay calm, present evidence, and make Vaughn the liability— She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. I understood. This wasn't just about my wedding. This was about my future, my money, my reputation, my ability to walk away from this marriage, if I chose to, without being destroyed in the process. I have a voicemail, I said. Fallon admitted the whole thing. She said Vaughn agreed. My mother knew. Arden's eyes sharpened. Do you have it backed up? Yes. Is the audio clear? Crystal. Good. Then here's what we do. Over the next 2 weeks, while I smiled through dress fittings and cake tastings, Arden built a legal firewall. She contacted Lyndon Hart, the manager at Vellum Ridge Estate, and quietly added a clause to our vendue contract. It stated that any guest who caused reputational harm or public disruption could be removed by security at the request of the contract holder. That contract holder was me, not Vaughn. Me. Arden also prepared a letter to Vaughn's family attorney, ready to send the moment Fallon made her move. It outlined everything: the voicemail, the fake pregnancy, Vaughn's complicity, and the fact that any attempt to paint me as unstable would be met with evidence to the contrary. You won't need to fight, Arden said. You just need to be ready. And I was. But there was one more thing I had to do. I had to confront Vaughn. Not with yelling, not with tears, with a question. It was 8 days before the wedding. We were sitting in my condo, eating takeout, pretending everything was fine. I set down my fork and looked at him. Vaughn, I said quietly, did you sleep with Fallon? He froze. His chopsticks hovered over his plate. He didn't look at me. Why would you ask me that? He said. Because I need to know. Silence. Long. Heavy. Finally, he put the chopsticks down. Once, he said. It was once, a long time ago, before we were serious. How long ago? 1.5 years. I nodded slowly. And you didn't think I should know? It didn't mean anything, Greer, he said, voice tight. It was a mistake. She came on to me. I was drunk. It lasted 5 minutes, and I regretted it the second it was over. I didn't respond. I just watched him. She said she'd never tell you, Vaughn continued, words spilling out now. She swore and I believed her. But then last month she called me and said if I didn't back her up on something, she'd tell you anyway and make it sound worse than it was. Back her up on what? I asked. He swallowed. On a story, he said, about her being pregnant. She said she just needed me to admit we slept together and she'd handle the rest. She said it wasn't about you, it was about her parents cutting her off financially and needing leverage. I stared at him. And you agreed. I panicked, he said. I thought if I just said yes, she'd leave us alone. I didn't think she'd actually do it. She's going to do it at the wedding, I said. Vaughn's face went white. What? She's going to announce it at the reception, in front of everyone, and you're going to stand there and let her because you're too scared to tell the truth. Greer. No, I said, standing up. You don't get to explain anymore. You made a choice. You chose to protect yourself instead of me, and now I'm going to make a choice too. What are you going to do? He asked. I looked at him for a long moment, and then I said, I'm going to let her do it. Vaughn's eyes widened. You're going to let her? Yes, I said, because the only way to stop Fallon is to let her think she's winning and then take everything away from her in front of the same people she wanted to humiliate me in front of. How? Vaughn whispered. I didn't answer. I just turned and walked into my bedroom and closed the door, because I wasn't going to tell him the plan. I wasn't going to tell anyone, not my best friend Tamsin, not Shay, and not even Arden beyond the legal scaffolding, because if Fallon was going to perform, then so was I. and my performance would be silence, calm, and one perfectly timed recording.
The week before the wedding, I did something I'd never done before. I stopped talking to my parents. Not dramatically. I just stopped answering. My mother called twice. I let it go to voicemail. My father texted asking if we needed help with anything last minute. I replied, "All set, thanks." Because here's what I'd realized after hearing that voicemail. Blythe Kavanaugh wasn't just enabling Fallon, she was helping her. And Stanton, he didn't care enough to stop it. For 32 years, I've been the easy daughter, the one who didn't make scenes, the one who got good grades, paid her own bills, and didn't ask for much. And what did that get me? A mother who helped my sister plan my public humiliation, and a father who looked the other way. So I stopped expecting anything from them. And that clarity, that cold, clean break, made everything easier. 3 days before the wedding, Shay Pembroke and I met at Vellam Ridge for the final walkthrough. The estate was beautiful. Rows of vines stretched out under the late afternoon sun, leaves rustling in the breeze. The ceremony site was set up on a stone terrace overlooking the valley, with white chairs and an arch wrapped in olive branches and cream roses. The reception area was under string lights, long farm tables set with linen and candles, a small stage for the band, and a DJ booth tucked near the bar. Shay walked me through the timeline. Cocktail hour, first dance, toasts, dinner, cake. "Who is giving toasts?" Shay asked, checking her notes. "My dad, Vaughn's best man, and Fallon." Shay looked up. "Your sister?" "Yes." "You're sure?" I smiled. "Positive." Shay studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay," she said. "But if anything feels off, you signal me. I'll handle it." "I will," I said. But I already knew I wasn't going to signal her to stop Fallon. I was going to signal her to let Fallon finish. Because the trap only works if the villain walks all the way in. That same afternoon, I met with Knox Merriman, Vellam Ridge's head of security. Knox was former military, mid-40s, the kind of man who didn't waste words. "You wanted to talk about guest management?" "Yes," I said. "I need to make sure that if someone causes a disruption, they can be removed quickly and quietly." Define disruption. Public accusations, yelling, anything that creates a scene or puts the venue at risk. Knox nodded. "We have protocols for that," he said, "but I'll need authorization from the contract holder." "That's me," I said. "Not the groom?" "No," I said. "Me." Knox made a note. "Understood," he said. "If you give the signal, we move." "What's the signal?" "Your call," he said. Eye contact and a nod, or you can say a phrase, whatever feels natural. I thought for a moment. "If I say, 'Thank you, that's enough,' you move." "Done." I shook his hand, and for the first time in 3 weeks, I felt a small flicker of control. Not revenge, control. Because this wasn't about hurting Fallon, it was about protecting myself. The night before the wedding, I stayed at a hotel near the venue with Tamsin Crow, my best friend since college. Tamsin had flown in from Seattle and didn't know anything about the voicemail or Vaughn or Fallon's plan. She just knew I'd been quiet. "You okay?" she asked, pouring us both a glass of wine. "Yeah," I said. "You don't seem okay." I looked at her. Tamsin had been there through every bad breakup, every family disaster, every moment I needed someone who wouldn't judge me, and I wanted to tell her, but I couldn't, because if I told her, she'd try to stop me. She'd say it wasn't worth it. She'd say to cancel the wedding, call off Fallon, walk away clean. But I didn't want to walk away clean. I wanted to walk away right.
So I'm just nervous, I said. Tamsin squeezed my hand. You're going to be beautiful tomorrow, she said, and Vaughn's lucky to have you. I smiled, but I didn't say anything, because I wasn't sure I wanted Vaughn anymore, and tomorrow I'd find out if he was strong enough to deserve a second chance, or if I'd be walking away from him too. The morning of the wedding, I woke up calm. I did my makeup, I put on my dress, and I looked at myself in the mirror and thought, no matter what happens today, you're going to be okay. And I believed it, because I had the voicemail, I had Arden's legal firewall, I had Knox's security team, I had Shay's logistics, and I had something Fallon didn't, proof. At 4 p.m., I walked down the aisle. Vaughn was waiting at the altar, hands clasped, eyes red like he'd been crying. I didn't smile, I just looked at him, and he looked back. And in that moment, I saw it. Regret, shame, and something else. Hope. Hope that I'd forgive him. Hope that this would all go away. Hope that he'd choose me over the truth. But hope isn't the same as a promise, and I wasn't making any more promises I couldn't keep. We said our vows, we kissed, everyone clapped, and then we walked into the reception, and I waited. Because I knew Fallon wouldn't wait long. She never does. The reception started exactly the way Shay had planned it. Cocktails on the terrace while the sun dropped lower over the vineyard, guests mingling with glasses of Napa Chardonnay and little plates of fig and prosciutto. The string lights came on as the sky turned violet. Everything looked like a wedding you'd see in a magazine. Soft, elegant, perfect. But I could feel it coming. The shift. Fallon was standing near the bar with a champagne flute, wearing a pale blush dress that looked almost white in certain lighting. She'd done that on purpose. She always did. She was laughing with one of Vaughn's cousins, head tilted back, hair catching the light. Playing the role. The beloved little sister, the maid of honor who was so happy for me. But every few minutes her eyes would flick toward me, checking, measuring, waiting. I stayed calm. I smiled at guests. I thanked people for coming. I held Vaughn's hand even though his palm was sweating. She's going to do it soon, Vaughn whispered to me during a lull. I know, I said. What are you going to say? Nothing. He stared at me. Greer, you have to say something. If you don't, people will think. I know what people will think, I said quietly, and I don't care. But I care, Vaughn said, voice cracking slightly. This is my reputation too. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I realized something. Vaughn wasn't worried about me. He was worried about himself, about what his family would think, about what his colleagues would say, about whether his mother, Marlowe Sutter, who was seated at table 2 in a steel gray dress and perfect posture, would ever forgive him for being part of this mess. Then you should have thought about that before you agreed to help her, I said. Vaughn flinched, but before he could respond, Shay's voice came through the sound system. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd please take your seats, we're about to begin dinner. The guests moved toward the long tables under the string lights. I sat at the head table between Vaughn and Tamsin. Fallon sat 3 seats down, next to my father. She caught my eye and smiled. Sweet, innocent, deadly. I smiled back, and I saw the flicker of confusion cross her face. Because I wasn't supposed to be calm. I was supposed to be nervous, afraid, braced for impact. But I wasn't, and that, I could tell, bothered her. Dinner was served. Salad, roasted chicken with herbs, garlic mashed potatoes, seasonal vegetables. People ate and talked and laughed. My father stood and gave a toast. Short, polite, forgettable. He talked about family and love and new beginnings, and I watched Fallon the entire time. She was fidgeting with her napkin, checking her phone under the table. Her knee was bouncing. She was getting impatient.
and impatience makes people sloppy. After my father sat down, Vaughn's best man gave a toast. Funny, charming, a story about Vaughn in college that got a few laughs. And then Shay's voice came over the mic again. And now the maid of honor, Fallon Price, would like to say a few words. The crowd clapped politely. Fallon stood, smoothing her dress, and walked to the microphone stand near the DJ booth. She looked radiant, confident, like she'd been waiting for this moment her whole life. And she had. "Hi, everyone," Fallon said, her voice warm and a little shaky. "I'm Greer's sister, and I've known her my entire life." A few people smiled. "She's always been the strong one, the responsible one, the one who had everything figured out." She paused, glancing at me, and I've always looked up to her. Lie, but it sounded good. So when she told me she was getting married, I was so happy for her, because Greer deserves to be happy. Another pause, longer this time, and then her expression shifted. The warmth drained out of her eyes, replaced with something sharper. "But I also need to be honest, because keeping secrets destroys families, and I can't keep this one anymore." The crowd went still. A few people leaned forward. Tamsin grabbed my hand under the table. Fallon took a breath, and then she said it. "I'm pregnant." Silence. Heavy. Electric. "And the father," Fallon continued, voice breaking, "is Vaughn." The room erupted. Not loudly, but you could feel it. The sharp intake of breath, the whispers starting at the edges, the phones coming up. Someone gasped. Someone else muttered, "Oh my God." My mother covered her mouth with her hand, but her eyes weren't shocked. They were watching me, calculating. Vaughn's face went pale. He didn't move, didn't speak, just sat there like a statue. And Fallon kept going. "I didn't want to say anything," she said, tears starting now, real or fake, I couldn't tell. "I wanted to let Greer have her day, but I can't keep lying. I can't keep pretending." She pulled something out of her clutch, a piece of paper, folded. She held it up. "I have proof," she said, voice shaking. "I have an ultrasound. I'm 8 weeks along." She unfolded the paper and held it toward the crowd. A grainy black and white image. Could have been anything, could have been anyone, but it looked official enough that people would believe it if they wanted to, and some of them wanted to, because scandal is more interesting than happiness. Fallon's eyes found mine again, waiting, begging me to react, to scream, to cry, to run. But I didn't. I just stood up, slowly, calmly, and I walked toward her. The crowd went silent. Fallon's smile faltered. "Greer," she said softly, "I'm so sorry. I know this hurts, but—" I held my hand. She stopped talking. I turned to face the crowd. 200 people staring at me, phones recording, witnesses everywhere. And I said, voice clear and steady, "Thank you, Fallon. That was very brave." Confusion rippled through the room. Fallon blinked. "What?" I said, "Thank you," I repeated, "because now everyone's listening." I turned to Shay, who was standing near the DJ booth with her headset on, eyes wide, and I said the words I'd been practicing for 3 weeks. "Play it."
The DJ hesitated for only a second. Then his hand moved to his laptop, and the speakers crackled. Fallon's face went white. "Wait," she said quickly. "Greer, what do you—" But it was too late. The voicemail started playing, and the first voice that came through the speakers was Fallon's, crystal clear, confident, unmistakable. "Just have to cry a little and everyone will believe me. Greer's so calm all the time, people already think she's cold. If I say I'm pregnant with Vaughn's baby, she'll either freak out and look crazy, or she'll stay quiet and look guilty." The crowd went completely still. You could have heard a pin drop on the grass. Fallon's mouth opened, but nothing came out. The voicemail continued.
It's not even about Vaughn. I mean, yeah, he's hot, but I don't want him. I just need her to know she's not untouchable." A few people gasped. Someone whispered, "Is that her?" Fallon's eyes darted toward the exits, toward my parents, toward Vaughn, but no one moved. Everyone was frozen, listening. Then my mother's voice came through, quiet, careful, but unmistakable. "Fallon, this is too much. What if she has proof you're lying?" And Fallon's response, sharp and confident, "Mom, I'm not stupid. I'll bring a fake ultrasound. Nobody reads those things. They just see a blob and panic. And Vaughn already agreed to say it happened once, so it'll feel real." The crowd turned to look at Vaughn. His face was gray. His hands were shaking. Marlo Sutter, his mother, stood up slowly from her seat, eyes locked on him like lasers. But the voicemail wasn't done. Fallon's voice came back now, softer, calculated. "And after, when Greer melts down and the wedding falls apart, I'll be the one everyone feels sorry for. She'll look like the villain, and maybe then people will stop acting like she's so perfect." A pause. Then Fallon's final line, almost a whisper, "She doesn't deserve him anyway." The voicemail ended. Silence. Absolute. Suffocating. And then the chaos started. Someone near the back said, "Did she just admit it was fake?" Someone else said, "She planned this?" A woman at table 4 turned to her husband and said, "That's her mother's voice. She knew?" Phones were out now, recording, texting, posting. Fallon stood frozen at the microphone, her fake ultrasound still clutched in her hand. Her face was red, her eyes were filling with tears, real ones this time, but not from guilt, from rage. "That's," Fallon started, voice shaking. "That's not, she edited that. She cut it together to make me look—" "No," I said quietly, cutting her off. "That's your voice, your words, your plan." "You recorded me without my permission," Fallon shouted. "You left me a voicemail," I said calmly, "by mistake. You meant to call someone else, and you didn't hang up." Fallon's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "That's illegal," she said desperately. "No," a voice said from the crowd. It was Arden Quill, my attorney, standing near table 6 with her arms crossed. She'd come as a guest, but she was here as protection. California is a 2-party consent state, but voicemails left on another person's phone are not protected. She has every legal right to that recording. Fallon whirled toward my parents. "Mom, Dad, say something." But Spanton and Blythe just sat there. My father's face was hard. My mother's eyes were down. They knew. They'd known the whole time, and now everyone else knew too. Tamsin squeezed my hand. "Holy shit," she whispered. I didn't respond. I just turned to Knox Merriman, who was standing near the edge of the terrace in his black suit, hands clasped, face unreadable. Our eyes met, and I said, clearly, "Thank you, that's enough." Knox nodded once. Then he moved. He crossed the reception area in 4 strides and stopped beside Fallon. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me," Knox said quietly. "What?" Fallon stared at him. "You're being removed from the event, per the contract terms and the request of the bride." "You can't do that," Fallon raised her voice. "I'm family." "You caused a public disruption based on false accusations. That's grounds for removal under venue policy." He gestured toward the exit. Fallon looked around wildly, at the crowd, at my parents, at Vaughn, but no one stood up for her. No one said a word. "This is insane," Fallon shouted. "She's the one who humiliated me. She played a private conversation in front of everyone." "You tried to ruin her wedding with a lie, on camera," said Tamsin suddenly, standing up. A few people murmured in agreement. Fallon's face crumpled. She looked at me one last time, and I looked back. Calm, cold, done. "I hate you," Fallon whispered. "I know," I said.
Knox placed a hand lightly on her elbow. "Ma'am." Fallon jerked her arm away, but she walked toward the exit, through the rows of vines, into the dark. And as she disappeared, the crowd stayed silent for a moment longer. Then someone started clapping, slow at first, then louder, and suddenly half the room was applauding, not for Fallon, for me, for standing up, for having proof, for not breaking. I didn't smile. I just turned back to the head table, and Vaughn was staring at me, eyes red, hands shaking. "Greer," he said quietly. I looked at him, and I said the only thing I could say. "We need to talk."
I didn't talk to Vaughn right away, not in front of everyone, not while phones were still recording and guests were still murmuring, and my mother was sitting 3 tables away pretending she hadn't just been exposed as an accomplice. I turned to Shay Pembroke, who was standing near the DJ booth looking like she'd just witnessed a car crash in slow motion. "Can you get us a private space?" I asked quietly. Shay blinked, snapped back into professional mode, and nodded. "The tasting room," she said. "I'll clear it." 5 minutes later, Vaughn and I were alone in a small, climate-controlled room lined with oak barrels and dim lighting. The door closed behind us. Silence. Vaughn stood with his back to me, hands in his pockets, shoulders tight. "I'm sorry," he said, finally. I didn't respond. "I know that's not enough," he continued, turning to face me. "I know I should have told you the truth from the beginning, but I was scared, and I made a terrible decision, and I—" "Stop," I said. He stopped. I looked at him. This man I'd agreed to marry. This man who looked steady and safe and like he'd never hurt me. And I realized something. I didn't love him anymore. Maybe I never had. Maybe I'd just loved the idea of him. The calm, the control, the promise of a life that wouldn't hurt the way my family did. But he'd hurt me anyway. And worse, he'd let someone else do it. "I don't want to hear you're sorry," I said quietly. "I want to hear the truth." Vaughn swallowed. "What do you want to know?" "Did you sleep with her more than once?" "No." "Did you know she was going to do this tonight?" Vaughn hesitated. "I knew she was planning something, but I didn't know when, and I didn't think she'd actually go through with it. But you agreed to back her up if she did." He closed his eyes. "Yes." "Why?" "Because she threatened to tell you we slept together and make it sound like I'd been cheating on you the whole time," Vaughn said, voice cracking. "She said if I admitted it happened once, a long time ago, before we were serious, it would sound like a mistake. But if I didn't, she'd say it was ongoing, that I was in love with her, that I'd been lying to you for years." "And you believed her." I panicked. I didn't know what else to do. "You could have told me," I said. "I thought you'd leave me." "I am leaving you." The words came out before I'd even fully decided, but the moment I said them, I knew they were true. Vaughn's face crumpled. "Greer, please," he said. "I know I messed up. I know I should have been honest, but we can fix this. We can go to therapy. We can—" "No," I said. "We can't." "Why not?" "Because forgiveness isn't the same as consequences. I can forgive you for sleeping with my sister. I can even forgive you for being too weak to tell me the truth. But I can't marry someone who chose to protect himself instead of me." Vaughn stared at me. "So that's it? One mistake and you're done?" "It wasn't one mistake. It was a pattern. You lied.
You hid, you let my sister manipulate you, and then you stood at that altar and made vows you knew you couldn't keep." "I meant those vows," Vaughn said desperately. "Maybe, but that doesn't change what you did." Silence. Long. Heavy. Finally, Vaughn nodded slowly. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. "I want you to sign the annulment papers Erden is going to send you, and I want you to stay away from my family." "Your family?" Vaughn asked, confused. "My mother helped Fallon plan this. My father knew and did nothing. They're not my family anymore, and I don't want you anywhere near them." Vaughn looked like he'd been slapped, but he nodded. "Okay," he said quietly. I turned toward the door. "Greer," Vaughn said. I stopped but didn't turn around. "For what it's worth, I really did love you." I looked back at him, and I said, "I know." Then I walked out. The reception was still going on when I came back, not because people were celebrating, but because no one knew what else to do. Guests were clustered in small groups, whispering. Some were still filming, some were texting. A few had already left. Tamsin spotted me and rushed over. "Are you okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "What happened?" I told him I'm leaving him. Tamsin's eyes widened. "You're serious?" "Yes." She studied my face for a moment, then nodded. "Good," she said. "You deserve better." I smiled. A real smile. The first one all night. Then I saw my parents. They were still at their table, sitting side by side, not talking. My mother's hands were folded in her lap. My father was staring at his empty plate. I walked over. They looked up when I stopped in front of them. "Greer," my mother started, voice tight. "We need to talk about—" "No," I said. "We don't." Blythe blinked. "I know you're upset, but Fallon is your sister, and family doesn't do what you did." "We were trying to protect her," Blythe said. "You were trying to control me," I said. "You've been doing it my whole life, making excuses for her, enabling her, and I'm done." Stanton cleared his throat. "Greer," he said, "I think you're overreacting. This was a misunderstanding. Fallon made a mistake, but—" "She didn't make a mistake. She planned this, with you, and Mom knew, and you both let it happen." My father's jaw tightened. "You humiliated your sister in front of 200 people. You played a private conversation publicly. That's not the daughter I raised." I stared at him, and then I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd. "You're right, I'm not the daughter you raised, because the daughter you raised would have stayed quiet. She would have let Fallon destroy her wedding, her reputation, and her future, just to keep the peace." I leaned down slightly, voice steady. "But I'm not her anymore." I straightened up. "Don't contact me. Don't call, don't text, don't show up at my door. I'm done." Blythe's face went pale. "You don't mean that," she said. "I do." "Greer, please," my mother said, voice breaking now. "She's your sister." "No," I said. "She's not. Not anymore." And I walked away. For the first time in my life, I walked away from them, and I didn't look back.
The next morning, I woke up in a hotel room in downtown Napa with Tamsin asleep on the other bed and my phone buzzing nonstop. Texts, calls, emails, social media notifications. I ignored all of it and opened my messages. One was from Arden Quill. Arden. Annulment papers drafted. Vaughn's attorney confirmed he'll sign. No contest. You're clear. I exhaled. Another message was from Shay Pembroke. Shay. Venue manager called. They're refunding your deposit in full. Said they respect how you handled it. Also, 3 other brides reached out asking for your planner. You're kind of famous now. I almost smiled. Then I scrolled further, and that's when I saw the real fallout. Someone had posted the voicemail online. Not the whole thing, just the key parts. Fallon admitting the pregnancy was fake. My mother's voice confirming she knew. Vaughn's complicity. It had been shared thousands of times. Reddit threads, Twitter debates, TikTok breakdowns. People were calling Fallon a narcissist, calling my mother an enabler, calling Vaughn a coward. And me? They were calling me a legend. Bride plays sister's fake pregnancy confession at her own wedding. She didn't cry, she didn't yell, she just hit play. This is what standing up for yourself looks like. I should have felt vindicated, but mostly I just felt tired, because this wasn't about going viral, it was about protecting myself. And now that the dust was starting to settle, I had to figure out what came next. I got out of bed quietly and went to the balcony. The morning air was cool and clean. The valley stretched out below me, vines green and still in the early light. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello? Hello, Greer Kavanaugh. Yes? This is Marlo Sutter, Vaughn's mother. I tensed. What do you want? I want to apologize, Marlo said, voice cool and measured. My son made a terrible mistake, and I want you to know that I had no knowledge of what your sister or your mother were planning. I didn't respond. I also want you to know, Marlo continued, that Vaughn will not contest the annulment, and I've instructed my attorney to ensure you receive everything you're entitled to under the prenup, including the clause protections. Why? I asked. Because you handled that situation with more grace and intelligence than most people twice your age, and because my son didn't deserve you. I blinked. Thank you, I said quietly. One more thing, Marlo said. If you ever need legal support, or if your family tries to retaliate, call me. I have resources, and I respect people who protect themselves. She hung up. I stood there for a moment, staring at my phone. Then Tamsin came out onto the balcony with 2 cups of coffee. Who was that? She asked. Vaughn's mother. Tamsin's eyebrows shot up. What did she want? To apologize, I said, and to offer help. Tamsin handed me a coffee. So what now? She asked. I took a sip, and I realized I didn't have an answer. For the first time in weeks, I didn't have a plan. No trap to set, no evidence to gather, no performance to give. Just space. I don't know, I said, and that felt okay. Because I'd spent so long reacting to other people, my sister, my parents, and Vaughn, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to just exist without defending myself. Well, Tamsin said, whatever you decide, I'm with you. I smiled. Thanks. We sat there in silence for a while, drinking coffee and watching the valley wake up. And then my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from a number I did recognize. Fallon. Fallon, you ruined my life. I stared at the message, and for a moment I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered the voicemail, the fake ultrasound, the years of sabotage and manipulation and cruelty disguised as sisterhood, and I typed back, "No, I stopped you from ruining mine." I hit send. Then I blocked her number, and it felt like the first clean breath I'd taken in years. Later that afternoon, Arden called.
I have news, she said. Good or bad? Depends on your perspective, Arden said. Your parents are threatening to sue you for defamation. I laughed, actually laughed. Let them, I said. You're sure? Arden asked. Because if they do, we'll countersue for emotional distress, conspiracy to commit fraud, and about 6 other things, and we'll win, but it'll be public and messy. I don't care, I said. Good, Arden said, because neither do I. She paused. Also, she said, I got a call from a reporter. They want to interview you. No, I said immediately. I figured, Arden said, but just so you know, you're getting offers, book deals, podcast invitations. People want your story. It's not for sale, I said. I respect that, but think about it, because sometimes telling your story on your terms is the only way to stop other people from telling it on theirs. I promised I'd think about it, but I already knew the answer. I didn't need to tell my story. I'd already lived it, and that was enough.
3 months after the wedding that wasn't, I sat in my condo overlooking the bay and realized I hadn't thought about Fallon in over a week. That felt like victory. The annulment papers had been signed. Vaughn was gone. My parents had tried to reach out twice, once through my aunt, once through a lawyer, but I'd made it clear through Arden that any further contact would be considered harassment. They stopped. Fallon, on the other hand, didn't stop. She'd tried to salvage her reputation online by posting a tearful video claiming I'd weaponized a private moment and that the voicemail had been taken out of context. It lasted 2 days before people started posting screenshots proving she'd lied about other things too. Old tweets, deleted Instagram captions, a Reddit thread from someone who went to college with her detailing a pattern of manipulation and fake crises. The internet is unforgiving when you give it a reason. Fallon deleted all her social media a week later, and I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not guilt, just quiet. My mother sent one final email. Subject line, please. I didn't open it. I archived it and moved on. Because here's what I learned. Some people will never apologize for hurting you. They'll apologize for getting caught, for losing control, for facing consequences, but not for the harm itself. And I didn't need their apology to move forward. I just needed to stop waiting for it. Tamsin flew back to Seattle, but called me every few days. How are you really doing? She asked one night. I'm okay, I said. You sound okay. I am. And I meant it. I'd started seeing a therapist, not because I was broken, but because I wanted to make sure I didn't carry Fallon's poison into the rest of my life. I'd also started saying no, to family events I didn't want to attend, to people who asked for favors they didn't deserve, to relationships that required me to shrink. It felt strange at first, but then it started to feel like power. One afternoon, I got a message from Shay Pembroke. Shay, a bride saw your story and wants to hire me specifically because of how I handled your wedding. She said you inspired her to stand up to her own toxic family. Thought you'd want to know. I smiled, not because I wanted to be famous, but because maybe, somewhere, someone else would see what I did and realize they didn't have to accept cruelty just because it came from family. If you've ever had to cut off people you loved because staying would have destroyed you, drop a comment. I want you to know, choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. A month later, I ran into Marlo Sutter at a charity event in the city. She was standing near the bar in a charcoal suit, talking to someone I didn't recognize. She saw me and walked over. Greer, she said, offering her hand. I shook it. How are you? I asked. Good, really good. Marlo studied me for a moment, then nodded. I believe you, she said. Vaughn's doing therapy. He knows he lost something he'll never get back. I hope he finds what he's looking for, I said, and I meant it. Not because I forgave him, but because holding on to anger felt like carrying someone else's luggage. Marlo smiled slightly. You're going to be fine, she said. I know, I said.
And I did. 6 months after the wedding, I moved. Not far, just to a new place with better light and a view I'd picked for myself, not to impress anyone. I hung art I liked, I bought furniture that felt like me. I invited Tamsin and a few close friends over for dinner, and we laughed until midnight. And one night, as I stood on my balcony watching the lights flicker across the bay, I realized something. I was happy. Not because I'd destroyed my sister, not because I'd humiliated my family, but because I'd chosen myself. I'd drawn a line and refused to let anyone cross it. And that line didn't make me cold, it made me whole. People ask me sometimes if I regret playing that voicemail, if I wish I'd handled it differently, if I think I went too far. And my answer is always the same: no. Because silence protects the people who hurt you, and I was done protecting people who saw my kindness as weakness. Fallon made a choice, my parents made a choice, Vaughn made a choice, and I made mine. I chose truth. I chose boundaries. I chose me. And if that makes me the villain in their story, I can live with that, because in mine, I'm free. I don't talk to my family anymore. I don't know where Fallon is or what she's doing. I don't follow Vaughn online. I just live. I work, I travel, I spend time with people who see me, not the version of me they want me to be. And some mornings, I wake up and forget they ever had power over me. That's the real victory. Not revenge, not vindication, just peace. So if you're reading this and you're stuck in a relationship, family, romantic, friend, that requires you to be smaller, quieter, or less than you are just to keep the peace, let me tell you something. The peace you're keeping isn't real. It's a lie you're helping them tell. And the moment you stop helping, the lie falls apart. It'll be messy. It'll be hard. People will call you selfish, cruel, unforgiving. Let them. Because the people who love you for real will understand, and the ones who don't, they were never yours to begin with. My name is Greer Kavanaugh. I'm 32 years old, and I walked away from my entire family to protect my future. I don't regret it. Not a little. Because some doors are meant to close, and the ones that open after, those are the ones worth walking through.